Good evening, everyone. I'm Synthia Cognita.
And I'm Felix Logis. Welcome to another episode of the Autonomous Brief Political Edition, where we break down the day's biggest political stories.
And what a day it's been, Felix. Let's start with some major developments in international affairs. The UK has made quite a bold statement regarding Ukraine.
Indeed, Synthia. According to reports, the UK government is accelerating the pace and scale of its military planning to support Ukraine. No 10 is saying that all options are on the table, including potential troops on the ground.
That's quite significant. Keir Starmer's spokesperson mentioned they might need thousands of troops to support Ukraine if a ceasefire is reached, whether by sea, on land, or in the air.
Speaking of military developments, Boeing just won a massive contract with the Air Force for their next-generation fighter jet. We're talking about a $20 billion deal for what they're calling the NGAD program.
And on that note, Trump just announced something similar, the F-47 fighter jet, which he's calling the most advanced, most capable, most lethal aircraft ever built.
You know what's interesting about these military developments? They're happening against the backdrop of increasing tensions with China. There's actually some controversy about Elon Musk's recent Pentagon visit.
Oh yes, I saw that. The New York Times reported that Musk was supposed to get a briefing on U.S. plans regarding China, but the Trump administration pushed back hard on that claim.
And speaking of Trump, there's been some significant movement in education policy. He's announced that the Education Department will no longer oversee student loans or special needs programs.
That's right. The plan is to move the federal student loan portfolio. We're talking about $1.6 trillion in loans for 43 million borrowers to the Small Business Administration. What are your thoughts on that, Felix?
It's a massive shift, Synthia. And it's not just about the loans. The special needs programs currently overseen by the Education Department's Office of Special Education Programs will also be transferred. This includes programs that administer the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
We're also seeing some interesting developments in environmental regulation. The EPA under Trump is making it harder for people to sue over Roundup-related cancer claims.
That's a controversial move, considering the corporation behind Roundup has already paid out nearly $11 billion in lawsuits.
And let's not forget about Turkey. The situation there seems to be deteriorating rapidly.
Yes, President Erdogan is consolidating power in concerning ways. He's nullified opposition leader Imamoglu's diploma and charged him with terrorism, effectively removing him from his position as mayor of Istanbul.
What's particularly interesting is how the international community is responding, or rather, not responding.
Exactly. With Trump's potential return to power, Erdogan seems emboldened, and European leaders appear willing to overlook Turkey's slide into autocracy as long as they have Ankara's support against Russian aggression.
Let's shift to domestic politics for a moment. In Texas, there's an interesting situation developing with the 18th Congressional District.
The heavily Democratic district has an empty seat, and Republican Governor Greg Abbott essentially has the power to delay the election to fill it until next year.
That's quite a power play. And speaking of power plays, we're seeing some interesting developments in government borrowing in the UK.
Yes, the latest figures show borrowing is higher than expected, putting pressure on Chancellor Rachel Reeves ahead of her spring statement next week.
Well, Felix, it seems like we're living in increasingly complex times, with significant changes happening across multiple fronts.
That's certainly true, Synthia. And speaking of complex situations, before we wrap up, we should mention Canada's upcoming election.
Right, Prime Minister Mark Carney is triggering an early election this weekend, largely due to ongoing trade tensions with the U.S. under Trump.
It's set for April 28th, and interestingly, the campaign is expected to focus heavily on who can best deal with the United States, rather than domestic issues like food prices or immigration.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
We'll be back tomorrow with more analysis of the day's political developments. I'm Felix Logis.
And I'm Synthia Cognita. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time on the Autonomous Brief.